evening to all members of ICOMOS Indian National Scientific Committee on Risk Preparedness. I'm Priyanka Panjwani, the coordinator, and along with my co-coordinator Shahzad Malik, we welcome you all to the third CultuRisk Tech Talks and monthly meetings, a member-driven initiative for knowledge sharing and interaction with NSC Risk Preparedness members. One second. This is a little brief on the event, which follows thematic areas of ICOMOS India Strategic Plan and MOA, and we hope to conduct it on the second Saturday of every month. Before we begin our talk, I would like to remind you of a few ground rules that you may view on the screen. Thank you. It is my great pleasure to invite fellow member and emerging professional Sukrit Sen today to deliver his presentation at the third CultuRisk Tech Talks. Sukrit Sen is a heritage conservationist by profession and a musician by passion. Currently, he is working as a research associate at ICCROM and a coordinator at Living Waters Museum. Sukrit has been in the field of Indian classical music for the last 2 decades and has performed across the globe. His primary interest lies in the tangible and intangible linkages as a catalyst to heritage conservation in current times. He has been working in the field since 2016 and has had the opportunity to work for renowned organizations such as UNESCO, ICOMOS, and National Park Service. Today, he will talk to us about his interest in intangible cultural heritage and its role in disaster risk preparedness. So without further ado, I invite Sukrit to share his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Priyanka, and thank you NSC RP for really giving me this opportunity. I feel I'm very young to be on a platform like this, but it's always a learning process. So I look forward to all the comments that may come at a later stage. So I will just share my screen. And, please notify me my screen is visible. Is my screen visible?
Yeah, you are good to go.
Just put my thing on full screen. So yeah. So again, thank you for having me. I'm going to just briefly speak about my journey in this field and how I kind of decided that, okay, I think disaster risk reduction is where I want to put my anchor down in. And this is a picture of the Kurseong station where my journey actually started. And I love this picture because it's all fog at the end and we don't really know where we are going, which kind of allows me to think that it's the journey that we should enjoy and the destination is where it is. We'll reach that at some point when we have to. And the reason I've kind of said that singing towards Resilient Tomorrow is because of my interest in intangible cultural heritage and how it has a huge role to play in disaster risk reduction, according to me and a lot of other people, but there's a lot of research to be done. So the first kind of session kind of slide is that of Kurseong, where I was working with the CCMP team, which is the Comprehensive Conservation Management Plan team, where we were developing a plan for the Darjeeling Himalayan Railway. And my classmate from college, Mona, who's also here today in the meeting, we kind of joined the CCMP team and we were stationed in Kurseong for 2 months, just mapping different kinds of risk on the DHR line. It was a very, very exciting thing. And, I just kind of think back and smile at times thinking that, oh, there was one lamppost and we would mark that so that this lamppost may fall on the station and it might damage, this tree might fall on the tracks and it might stop. So, as the innocence that was there, but it was so much fun. We got to learn. Again, Dr. Rohit Jigyasu was our coordinator who kind of helped us, get this internship. We were working under him, under his guidance on this. And it was an absolute beautiful experience. So this is our office, like on the picture in the middle with Mona. And we had a very interesting, the picture, this one is the Kurseong station where our office was. We in a heritage kind of a office. We had a great fireplace itself, but we didn't have wood, so we would actually burn paper. But now that I think from the climate change perspective, I don't think this is something I would be very proud of, but at least we enjoyed the moment at that point of time. So, this is where we kind of started mapping risks in the Darjeeling Himalayan kind of railway. Next is my thesis. My architectural thesis was, based out of a place called Bali Devanganj. It is a small place near in Bengal, where we have a lot of these Bengal temples, which are absolutely in ruins, and just a lot of physical, attitudinal, institutional vulnerabilities for which these architectural marvels are kind of really going down. And actually, that is where my intuition kind of started. That okay, we need to find a way to kind of have the community talk to us, because again, this top-down approach is something that I was worried about, that people go there, do something, and then it doesn't link with the community. So I was trying to find ways by which the community can actually go into the site and they can continue being on site, which is why Padavali Kirtan, which is a very kind of art form that is prevalent in that area, was something that I hooked onto. And that is why even my design was something which interpreted stories of Padavali Kirtan, which were actually visible on, the terracotta plaques that were there. So I was trying to bring that linkage and trying to understand how Padavali Kirtan could really become a medium to attract people into the site. And my idea entirely was, the moment people are inside the site, people are using the site, they are going to take care of it. All they need is a little bit of guidance from experts, so that they have a more holistic approach to the maintenance of that place, instead of just painting it plain, or just putting cement on it. So I think that is what I was planning to aim, and that is like my first experiment where I really got intrigued with the tangible intangible linkage that exists between heritage and how people are associated, and how that intangible heritage really lies in between like tangible heritage and the community, and how we should really mobilize it. So this was again one place where kind of hit me that okay, we can take this approach. Next up is my experience in the US ICOMOS internship that I did in 2019. Again, a very, very interesting experience where I was stationed at the National Park Service in NCPTT. It's in a small kind of town called Natchitoches in Louisiana, which mainly deals with technology and training in conservation practices. And when we went there, I was very excited because my first visit out of the country, working with absolute amazing people with amazing instruments. And the work that was actually given to us was scanning of these tenant farmer cabins. Now, when we say tenant farmer cabins, these are basically slaves who were kind of brought into the US from Africa. After emancipation, they became tenant farmers because they would basically rent out the place instead of working in their owners' fields, and that is how they became tenant farmers. Again, tenant farming is obsolete now, but the cabins in which they stayed, the cabins in which they worked is really going down. So NCPTV's main aim was to kind of laser scan these things and document these cabins, which existed in different parts of Louisiana. So, and it was important because on the left, you see a cabin, and on the right is the same cabin, like within our stay of 3 months. So that is how vulnerable a state it is in today. So it's like going away that fast. And NCPT just wanted to document it and understand that, so that there's a story to tell at a later stage. So, we were laser scanning these cabins, and we were also developing oral histories, because that's something, like I said, I'm really interested in the community bit of conservation. So we started oral histories as bit. We used the Faro laser scanner to scan these buildings, which would give fantastic kind of scans. And this is the kind of ambience we had when we used to go to these scans. We would go with machetes and, these weapons and whatever to get rid of grass and, all the forests. And I remember my coordinator, Jason, when we went there, I was very annoyed with him because we both were kind of on our expedition inside one of these cabins. And he said that, okay, the rule is open the door. If you see a beehive, run. I'm like, and that is when he's actually holding the door to open. So that's literally like 2 seconds before he's opened the door. I'm like, hello, you need to really make us aware before, 5 minutes before, so that we have adequate clothes or whatever, just to avoid the sting from the bees. But that's how fun it was. It was like an experience every time, And this is the example of the scans that we would do. And we made very beautiful videos out of it, which were kind of walkthrough videos of these sites. So, it is accessible here. You can always find them on the NCPTT YouTube channel, from where, we added music and, an entire walkthrough of these things. We also used NCPTT is super rich. Like, one thing that I enjoyed working with in the National Park Service was they have a lot of money for everything. So they were like, okay, now you're done with scanners. Okay, let's get you for aerial photography, let's get you a drone. So you're like, okay, let's have fun. So we took the drones up to take photographs, and we would stitch and just have fun, like that was our main aim. Now, this was where, I started questioning the work I was doing. Now, this person is Mr. Elvin Shields. He was from a family of the sharecroppers. And what I understood from them is that while National Park Service is really working hard towards documenting their heritage, there is a community, whose land it is, but they cannot, of course, tear down their houses because, it's illegal from the government. But they were not very happy about keeping those houses, because these houses remind them of the dark past that they had. These houses remind them of the ill practices that were practiced against their ancestors. And from his point of view, I was like, that's true. Like, I think if they are the owners and if they don't want to keep their houses, I think that's totally fair. And I don't think the government should interfere in between, saying that, no, we should keep these houses and protect them. So, we started knowing a lot of their stories about, what these wallpapers were. They would put magazines. These were small tanks to collect rainwater. This is kind of old archival images that we collected. This was a small plantation toy, that was gifted to me, while I was talking to these people, which they would make out of, wire. So, this is the kind of life they would have. And we also thought that on one side, while we are talking about, reaching out to more people with these stories, on the other side, I'm also thinking of, like, this is the government's agenda is, okay, to reach out to people and tell these people that, okay, we want to do this, we want to celebrate the heritage. But on the other side, these people don't really want it. So I was kind of in a dilemma that, okay, what we are doing, is it true? And, these are, on the right is this, I'm forgetting his name, but he would explain to us the paintings of a painter who stayed in one of these, Clementine Hunter, whose paintings would be there. And we made a very beautiful walkthrough of this entire house with him explaining. So it was like a virtual heritage walk. And now this was pre-pandemic. Now this became a huge hit during the pandemic, but I guess this is the future. So that is when I really got interested in, I'm a musician. So I always, if there's music anywhere, I'm always, like, okay, I need to talk about it. So I started talking about the music of Louisiana. Like, it's so famous. New Orleans is known for its jazz music. It's known for its blues music. So I started asking them that, what about these sharecroppers? What about these tenant farmers? What are they doing about this music? And I understood that, they talk about this heritage of theirs with a lot of pride. And so I was questioning that, okay, then why aren't we talking about the music when we are talking about these slave, tenant farmer cabins? So I asked this question that, is it really gone? That, why are we not talking about the music when these people are clearly so proud of it? And then I started doing a little bit of research, and then I understood that, okay, there's still a lot of music. And, while, again, the white and the black is a huge factor in particularly where we were doing. So while the whites practice a lot of music, they're actually practicing, music that was actually developed by the so-called, blacks. And that is when I started doing some research on black music. And this is what we found. Where I was staying, these are juke joints. Juke joints are places where every Friday after working on the fields, these sharecroppers would go just to drink beer and hear music. And very, very interestingly, this on the extreme right is a juke joint called Baba's. And since we were from the government, we took advantage. We entered the place and we found a poster with B.B. King on it, performing in this very place. And I'm like, hello, this is treasure. Like, why are we not talking about this? Like, as a musician, I was really excited about B.B. King having performed there. So that is when I gave the proposal to my office that, I think the approach that we are taking is slightly wrong. I didn't say wrong, but we may take a different approach to really have the community talking. Let's start talking about something they're actually interested in. Let's start talking about their music. Let's start talking about their juke joints first. Let's go to their houses later. But let's actually first try to make these communities understand that what we are trying to do, that we are trying to celebrate your heritage and not romanticize and explain to people how badly you were treated back in the days. So we made a lot of music, and I could finally manage to get my office say yes to scanning one of the juke joints that was there. And fortunately, NCBTT has agreed to, get me back for a second round of, these laser scanning, where we will just be laser scanning these juke joints. And I'm going to prepare a proposal on how, the music with people, how can we develop entire management plan where we celebrate their heritage. So, the juke joints tangible, the jazz music the intangible. So, that's how we're going to do it, and how the laser scan is going to be a tool to kind of, and interpret that. And on my right is are two friends of mine who kind of introduced me to, on the right, if you see that instrument, it's called kalimba. It's an African instrument. Again, it came to the US with the blacks, but they have continued playing it. And that's what I'm kind of, talking about. And, on my right bottom, this is a house where BB King would stay when they would come. So since they were blacks, they would have a separate hotel where they would stay out. So not just juke joints, there's so much of related associated heritage along with them. These are images of all the musicians I spoke to, and this was a dance party that we went to, just practicing and being a part of their culture, just to understand these juke joints. We made a lot of oral histories with them, which helped me, kind of influence my office that we should do this. Like, this is material. So it was a lot of fun, like just interacting. Office hours, I would go out and interacting with musicians. That was just the most amazing office experience I would ever have. But other than that, since I'm talking about the US ICOMOS internship, like, this was some other experiences I had. I was in Louisiana, where we could fire a real gun, and of course it's not safe, but yeah, it was a lot of fun. Oops, I guess Zoom stopped my screen share at the moment I said gun. This was glimpses. Oops. I'm sorry. Something's happening. Yeah. So I'm a big fan of cars, and I think that was also one experience that I had in the US, of riding some amazing cars. And I was absolutely like, I can't wait to get back to the US just to drive cars. These are experiences from my office, where we would play croquet, another traditional kind of game out in Louisiana. This was our boss making ice cream one day. This was a movie screening. These were our colleagues. These are the cars I rode, a lot of fantastic Corvettes and, Cadillacs and Minis. Amazing. Of course, I'm a huge foodie. Had some great meat. Sorry, I don't want to offend any vegetarians out there, but like, the greatest meat I've ever had. So yes, starting from crocodile to beef to everything. And this was our team out there. Fun team, and I look forward to meeting them very, very soon. So the next step that I'm going to talk about is where I am more kind of focused on what is the role of ICH in disaster risk reduction. And that is what my thesis was on, my master's thesis at the Center for Heritage Management at Ahmedabad University. I was guided by Dr. Rohit Jigyasu. I was actually guided by Dr. Jigyasu the entire time, but this time he came in officially, where I was really questioning that, we talk about buildings when they are at risk from different hazards, from different vulnerabilities. But at the same time, the practices that are inside these buildings are also at risk, right? But I don't think there has been enough initiatives where we have looked at the practice, being at risk, and particularly doing a study on that. Now, of course, the building is a huge factor. And I think this is where the entire debate comes in, that we shouldn't separate the tangible and the intangible. It's all kind of connected. So there was this part called Chitpur in Chitpur Road on Kolkata, where we have a lot of, traditional practices and trades. So I kind of mapped all of them and tried to look at different ways in which, these are at risk. So these are the images of the different practices that are there. These are marble statue makers. He's an instrument maker. He would sell knives. This is a brass maker. He's a Shondesh is, famous in Calcutta, sweet meat. So he's actually a person who would make the molds of this sweet meat. On the middle is a milk trade that has been happening for, and all these trades have been happening for over 2 centuries. None of them actually know when it started, but they assume that it's been right after the British came in, because that route was the main route from where traders would come in, as it's just next to the river. And that route was also taken to go to the different religious, spaces that were there in Calcutta. So that was like a main road of sorts. So I kind of used the the model, pressure and release model adapted from Piers Blakey, and try to understand the different ways in which particularly the intangible cultural heritage was being affected. Of course, physical, attitudinal, institutional vulnerabilities were also taken into consideration. And we kind of looked at, what is the composite risk of every kind of practice that exists there. In terms of the different hazards, structural collapse, earthquake, cyclone. I did a little study on what are the probable hazards that may affect Calcutta, and accordingly found out solutions. Since this was a management thesis, we tried to find out that how can we find solutions using these intangible cultural heritage. So even the suggestions that were kind of given, identifying the different stakeholders, we tried to mobilize the different, strategies or different skills that these traders or these practitioners would have, including their strength in using fire, their strength in cutting stone, which are also skills that we require in a post-disaster situation in a lot of times. So we tried to propose ideas where we could actually mobilize these people, making them a part of the community and really engaging them. I'm not a big fan of the word empowering them, but yes, engaging them in different ways, making them feel that, okay, this is your space and we need to work. Again, this is a thesis. This was not really, implemented on site. But when I spoke to these people, like whatever proposal I had made was in consultation with the traders with whom I was in touch with. And they agreed to the fact. But of course, there's a lot of bureaucracy in the process with homeowners, which is always a disadvantage. But we have to start somewhere before we say we cannot. Now coming to my kind of professional ideas, where I started working with the Living Waters Museum when I was in Ahmedabad itself. And since I was a musician, I initially started talking about water and music. And on the left, this is actually an image of the community in Papua New Guinea, where they would actually use these coconut shells and play them underwater to kind of attract sharks. Now, on studying that, I realized that they're actually using a lot of physics. And we started making music out of that to kind of teach students like the same principle, where we are teaching them not only physics, but also kind of giving them an idea of the history, and also letting the students judge whether this practice is right or wrong. And that is where I think the concerns for environment came in, where the students felt that, okay, this is a great way to attract fishes, but can we use this method to maybe catch fishes for the aquarium? Like, these students are innocent, so they come up with very interesting ideas. And I love working with children. So on the left is an image of a small workshop that I held in a school in Ahmedabad. And, the students would just dip anything and, come up with, they developed a quiz, which was just particularly on sound, on that principle of physics of sound and water. In the middle is an image of a concert that I had done in association with Utensil Museum, where I kind of understood that these are water carrying utensils that the gypsies of Gujarat would use. And, so they wanted, multifunctional instruments, which they can use as instruments as well as carry water. And so I thought of maybe a concert would be a good way to start talking about it. And on the extreme right is an art exhibition that I was a part of in Ahmedabad also, where I tried to bring in the concept of climate change, the concept of water footprint. So if you see that wall, I have hung like really dump items from whatever was used on site, because it was a huge exhibition like Kala Ghora in Bombay. So I had actually collected different things that were used at different times in that space, bottles, trousers of the workers. I had, of course, replaced them with new ones, tires, old saris, bottles. And I calculated every item, the footprint of every item. And the reason I kept these huge utensils was, if you notice, under every utensil, I've kept a liter. So one utensil is 230 liters or 275 liters, just to have a quantitative understanding of, like, if a jeans is taking 2000 liters of water to be produced, how much water is 2000 liters? So when we say 2000, not every person can actually identify. But when they see these huge utensils, it's like just 230 liters. But the fun part was, we actually also did a drum circle with people there, where people actually came in. This video is also up on YouTube. People actually came in, they actually played these utensils. So we actually kind of celebrated the entire concept of water footprint. And a lot of children actually came back asking very, very interesting questions that how are we calculating 2000 liters of water? So we actually sat down one day to sit with those kids to just understand the entire process of how are we calculating the water right from the beginning of the plantation until it's thrown away. Next is an initiative that I'm doing in Calcutta. It's called the Ghats of Kolkata, where again, it's a student-led initiative where we are actually absolutely left it to the students to kind of perceive the Ghats in their format. On the left is a photograph of college students on a sketch walk where they develop fantastic sketches of these Ghats, turned out different moods. We are also collaborating with the Modern High School in Calcutta, where we are working with almost 250 children, and they're developing different kind of methods to interpret the Ghats. So this was and the idea is we would have experts coming and speak to these people just to inspire them. And as Living Waters Museum, we would just be the medium to kind of have the students talk to the experts. So this was a session of photography where we had Mr. Raghu Rai and Mr. Deboshi Gupta, very famous photographers, come in and speak to the photography club of Modern High School and understand understand their perspective on photographing the Ghats. On the middle is a child acting Rani Rashmani and telling the story of her role as a female leader in Bengal and her association with the Hooghly River. And on the right are two animals, actually, a snake and a snail, talking about the different environmental factors. And these are puppets that they have made, talking about the environmental factors on the Hooghly River. So we've come up with very, very innovative ideas that we probably would have never really thought of. And this is a very, very recent kind of project where we collaborated with. We got a grant from the US Consulate in Kolkata, where we're trying to understand. I was working in the Sundarban last year a lot after a post-cyclone Amphan, where we try to understand that what is it that the community wants and what is it the government is doing wrong. And the community kind of came up with their traditional knowledge, saying that there are many kind of mangroves, and none of them who are coming and planting these things have an understanding of these mangroves. So we sat down with the community to understand and kind of chalk out the different mangroves that are there and what are its qualities. We sat down with different experts from different universities and tried to understand how can we develop an economic model also to kind of have these communities take the initiative. So now we are going to work with students again in Calcutta and in the Sundarbans to kind of engage in peer learning to understand this aspect of mangroves and its role in the rising climate change factors that are affecting the Sundarban or the Bay of Bengal Delta. So this is going to be a year-long project, and this is just the beginning. These are images from our first kind of site visits. They're going to start it off. They're going to kickstart this project on the 18th of November in the American Center with students coming in and sitting for a roundtable and discussing these factors itself. And my last slide is my work with ICCROM, where I am assisting Dr. Jigyasu in, again, two kind of publications. Again, very, very associated with the kind of life I've had so far. The first one is the Work in Action Guide, which is a collaboration with UNDRR and ICCROM, where we're trying to understand that how can we really highlight the how instead of there's a lot written on the what is traditional knowledge. So we're really trying to highlight how do we implement this in current situation, taking into consideration scientific knowledge, traditional knowledge, and also breaking that dichotomy that really exists between the two. And the second is a guide on using 3D laser scanning in documentation, which we are doing in association with the CEP University and Nottingham University, where we are trying to understand that how can we mobilize 3D laser scanning to develop proposals in a post-disaster situation. So what are the kind of things that we can recover from laser scans to really understand the needs in a post-disaster situation, and time being a very important factor, how we can really use this scanning technology to get things done in a good amount of time. So yeah, this is it. I hope this is not exactly related to disaster risk reduction, but I suppose there has been a lot associated in different ways, and I've tried to kind of link climate change, water footprint, and and more importantly, involve students in the entire process. So thank you for having me again.
Thank you a lot, Sukrit, for sharing with us your wide range of experiences and your journey through intangible heritage and disaster risk management. Right. So now we open the floor for questions, if there are any. Anyone can unmute themselves and ask. I really found the calculating water footprint very interesting. Would like to know more about how that is done, if you can.
So like calculating water footprint is basically understanding. There are studies on it. There's a lot of study available online, and there are proper books also. So whenever we are doing a process, so for example, if we are making a shirt, for example, so the entire process from the harvesting of the cotton to the processing of it in the factories, to the amount of water that's kind of spent when we are putting them up on shops. So when we talk about shops, we're also talking about the packaging, everything. And when we actually calculate, so every step, there are probably 150 steps in between. So every step would probably take 2 liters of water, or maybe 4 liters of water, or 5 liters of water. But when we add that entirely, we get a footprint. So even you wouldn't believe, but I showed some beautiful pictures of meat. Again, I am not very proud of it, but one piece of beef brisket actually kind of occupies 20,000 liters of water, which includes the amount of water that the cow drinks, also includes the food that the cow eats. So production of that food, everything. So that's how we calculate water footprint. It's really, it's not something that a lot of people think about in their day-to-day lives, but it's something definitely to think about. And I've heard a lot of students actually come back to me saying that, okay, now, so we would actually ask these students that, how would you calculate the amount of water footprint you generate in every day? And the students actually came up with very beautiful ideas that, okay, we would drink less water. Obviously, that was not a solution. But, you can always take lesser time to take a bath. But, these are questions that our work with Living Waters Museum is to just leave them with questions, leave them in a situation where they come up with the questions. And I think that is what we want the students to really explore and, kind of understand how they want to go ahead.
Right. Yeah. We should have a similar exercise in ICOMOS, maybe.
Yeah.
So hi, Sukrit, I have a question which is regarding the children's only. See, like 2 or 3 people here are from academic background. They are working with the academics. But how do you find the children with whom you engage? Are they being taught formally about the climate change or about heritage, about disasters? Or no,
No. So what I feel is that whenever we have discussed this with students always come up with very bookish answers. That yes, Sundarban is in danger. It's going out. That is why the cyclones are coming in, and it's really affecting the sites out there. But that's because that is what they learn on their books. Now we have to really understand that, the why part. That why is it happening, in the sense it's not something that's happened in 2 days. It's something that has happened over the years, and some way we also try to make them understand indirectly that we are also responsible for it in different ways. I think we all are, if there's climate change, if we're talking about it, we all are responsible for it in different ways. And the students need to understand that, because at the student level, we cannot go tell them you should stop doing this. But what I feel is they should become aware with the things that they're doing in their daily lives. The bookish language kind of takes them to a certain direction, which they don't really understand. It's like mugging up that, okay, climate change is bad. But what is climate change? Do they understand that on burning a piece of paper, we are contributing a fraction to the climate change? On taking a car, we are traveling from one distance to another. The students are fascinated when we told them the concept of pool cars, that this is the amount of carbon footprint you generate when you're taking one car, and this is the amount of carbon footprint that you take when 4 of you are traveling in the same car. So what is it that you want to do? So we have to really kind of bring case studies, which I feel is missing in the current curriculum. And case studies, not big case studies like, factories and, river pollution and all these things. Day-to-day, daily life, daily case studies. That is what, and I think I will actually bring up a instance from one of my heritage walks in Ahmedabad itself, where we went out for a heritage walk with students. And this was my first experience where I was talking about the history, where I was talking about when it was built, the typical architectural thing. But the first question that a student asked me was, what is that pigeon doing inside that mosque? Like, where did it go inside? And that is what really kind of intrigued me, that, the big things are not something that the students think about. It's actually the smaller little things that the students connect to, which we as professionals often miss out. And I think that is where we have to kind of work on. And, that's what we are trying to really do. So even in the Ghats of Kolkata project, we've given the students their freedom to we'll be there to guide them in whatever information they need or whatever, but the interpretation of, I would never think of a process of, two puppets coming in as a snail and a snake to talk about, the changes that are happening in the river, that the fact that they're not getting food to eat, the fact that the fishes are being taken by the fishermen. I would probably write 200 words on it, but that's such an interesting way to, put it out in 2 minutes. So I think this is the magic of students.
No, completely agree with you. But as you have coordinated with the students at many levels, so why not you opt for the Ghats of Kolkata only? Why didn't you opt for any architecture college and you went to schools at a so is there any criteria for that or any logical perspective or rational for that?
So as architecture, we are not saying that we haven't collaborated with architecture college. We have collaborated, but again, the problem with, I would not say a problem, this is what architecture students are meant to do, is look at the Ghats from a very architectural point of view. When an architect goes to a Ghat, they're going to see how big is the opening, how high is the building, what is the material used, how old it is. But when a student goes into that place, he's going to actually focus on the games that are being played in the Ghats. How are the children using those Ghats? What are the activities that are there around the Ghat? What is the food that you get around the Ghat? Which also, I think, personally adds a lot of value to the entire, understanding of a Ghat. And which is why we really try to focus on school students, particularly. It's an open project. It was an open invitation for schools, and these schools actually got in touch with us and said that we want to work with you. And we were like, sure, why not? And that is where, and even, we didn't think of these things. So there are different clubs in the school, which looks at different. So there is a food club. Food club is only looking at different food items that you get in the Ghats. The business club is looking at business ideas around the Ghat. The scribes, or which is the drama club, is looking at making short stories, like short films, on how these Ghats can be interpreted. So as architects, I often feel that, we have that horse's view, where we only tend to look at a very building level. I'm not saying that, it's not changing. Of course, we're looking at intangible aspects, but I feel that the vision that we have is very different from the vision that students have. And as experts, I think we often tend to miss out on that. So unless and until we understand students, what is it that they are viewing, if we are planning to develop a syllabus, for example, on water stories or on carbon footprint or on climate change, we have to understand it from their point of view. Do they understand factories? Half of the students haven't even seen factories. To them, the smoke that's coming out from factory is just black smoke. They don't understand how much carbon dioxide is inside that. Right. So we have to very from their level, understand that, what is it that's contributing to the climate, and at their level, how can they change? Once they know that, okay, if I'm traveling alone in a car, it's contributing that much to a carbon footprint, I'd rather take a cycle. It will be much easier for them to understand, okay, how much carbon probably a factory is producing. So, so that's, I think, what it's my point of view again, and this is where we've kind of worked with students that way, and it's worked for us. So, that's the thing.
Yeah, I'm also quite interested to know more about the 3D laser scanning project.
Yeah.
So, is it for the conservation professionals, or is it for anyone to
So
use?
the documentation that we are doing is mainly for stakeholders in the disaster risk reduction field. And we are just trying to make them understand that since time is a very important factor, particularly in a post-disaster situation, what are the advantages that we may have using a laser scanner, replacing a normal photograph or replacing, manual documentation of sorts. So for example, when we take laser scanning, we get very detailed analysis of a building or a site in a very, very short period of time. And, some things like bends or things like cracks, which are often, we can do it manually. It has been happening manually over time. But it is a very time consuming process. And two is, it's not always to that level of precision. Whereas in laser scanning, we kind of have precision up to 0.05 centimeters. So that's how exact kind of, data comes in. And we are really trying to understand how using the laser scanner might be a beneficial. Now, the only disadvantage is that it's a very expensive process. That is also something that we are highlighting in the guidance document. But we are also suggesting solutions as to how can we reduce those costs. In the sense, so that is exactly the process that we are. So when we are taking the case study of Bela in Gujarat. It's a kind of a heritage village near Kutch, and we are collaborating with CEPT University. We're collaborating with Nottingham University. So that is the solution that we're also providing them. So collaborations like this is where we can. Laser scanners are there. The moment you make it an academic process, the moment you make it a learning process, I think there are scopes to reduce the cost. And in the long run, also, we see that the amount of, if we consider time to be money, in long run, laser scanners, tend to be a very cheap process. So, but only in the long run, otherwise in the beginning, it's an expensive process, but yeah, that's about it. I hope I could answer your question.
Yeah, it's quite a disparity when you said the money was there for everything in the US. And
yeah, absolutely. Because, I'll share a small story. The first day I go to office, and it was just an office visit. They were introducing us to our instruments. They were introducing us to the office, the rooms and everything, different instruments that they use. So I was learning how to use a laser scanner. I was doing some study, and I got to find out that we can use these, white spheres that we use to basically stitch the different scanners. So I suggested that we'll be doing, good, like huge scans, particularly entire villages or, like cabins, a lot of cabins together. So we might require those spheres. So the officer said, sure. And I kid you not, but the sphere was actually on my table the very next day. Amazon, whatever, premium of sorts. But then I saw the price tag, and that particular sphere, I think, cost something around like $400-500. And I was like, okay, it's this expensive. How expensive is the scanner? Which made me, kind of do some research. And the scanner itself is like, like 4 or 5 lakhs. And the first question I asked my supervisor was, by any chance, if this scanner breaks when I'm using it, who pays for it? The only answer he gave was insurance. And I thought that was such a good way to do it. And I was actually, kind of really flabbergasted by the way we work in India, where, particularly in an academic institution, where they don't let us even touch these, very, these instruments. And they're like, no, we'll keep it like that. Special experts will come. And then they actually stay there and rot, and they just go. But, their attitude completely was something that I really enjoyed working with, where they're like, no, you should experiment, go to the mud, do whatever you feel like, and that is exactly how learning happens. Instead of, they really encouraged us to like go on field and learn the laser scanner instead of us reading lines and lines of books, which made it so much more easier for us. So, yeah.
Yeah, so to make laser scanners commonplace, we need to look for insurance now, I think.
Well, even the laser scanner that we are using, we have got it insured. So like Faro, which produces the scanners, basically is something that has is a partner with us, and they have sent us a second-hand kind of laser scanner which we are using right now, which is working great. So again, this is a kind of a solution that we are suggesting, that these collaborations, and this is the particular way we approach to reduce costs.
Great. I think there is a question for you by Swapna on the chat. because she's not able to turn on the mic. She's saying NCPTT is the premier organization for all aspects of preservation, from education to work guidelines to being a grantee and a grantor. Unfortunately, the same doesn't exist in India. What would you suggest? Should we have one organization or multiples take up the onus?
That's a tricky question. Well, when I went there first, I was always like, I was always cursing, like, I shouldn't go back to India. This is not how it works. Whatever. But then I personally love being in India, and heritage in India is very different from heritage in the US. So I personally prefer this thing. But this is a very valid question about what would you suggest should we have in an organization of multiples take up owners. I personally feel that if we have I feel when we make too many smaller organization, it kind of creates problems. But that's my personal opinion. This might change. So in the US, what happens is we have the National Park Service, and we have different organizations. So NCPTT particularly looks into technology and training. That's exactly what they focus on, and that is probably why they have these instruments where they allow students to come and play with them. I don't think if we go to a different organization under the National Park Service, they will allow us to do that, because there they don't get the funding for that. So I personally feel that if we have a STEM system in India as well, where we have the Ministry of Culture, we have we have different organizations who are actually kind of under the Ministry of Culture. We have to work with Ministry of Culture at some point of time. If we have the STEM organization where there's one source, I personally feel that there's a lot less complication. But that's a personal opinion. So I have a trick question, but being an attorney myself, I ask this of other who continue association, especially in the tech and train. Well, getting technology, I would say, is not difficult in India. It's definitely more, it's probably easier in the US, but getting technology in India, we are getting there. For example, the fact that Nottingham University selected India and Bela in Kutch as a site is an example of a fact that India is also gaining importance in those aspects, and the kind of varied amount of heritage that we have, in India and different parts of the country, is what really attracts a lot of these funders. So I would definitely say that there are a lot of opportunities, but again, as a heritage professional, what I feel is that marketing is something that we really have to focus on. Like, again, this is a personal opinion. How we really need to understand business. We are very emotional as heritage conservationists. We get very emotional with buildings. We get very emotional with communities, very emotional with intangible cultural heritage, whatever. But if the communities who are the main stakeholders, if they don't get to earn from what we are doing, I think there's no future. And that is why a lot of heritage projects in India are failures. This is, again, a personal opinion. Please don't. But I feel that heritage professionals should really understand business and understand from a community's perspective that what is it that they need. And we need to stop romanticizing about the fact that all heritage should stay. Like, if heritage should go, like, if the community who's the main owner of the heritage, if they feel that it should go, it probably should go. I'm saying very, very, tricky things on public forum, but again, very, very personal opinion. I have a huge way to go. I might change in the later stage, but this is what I feel in whatever little experience.
Your experiences shape you. I saw that in the project you did. You spoke about the dark past and the ill practices, and how the community people don't want to save some of those tenant farms.
Yep.
And how
so that is what changed me. Like, the government is wanting to uphold tenant farmers, but the community doesn't want it. And I think the community has every right to get rid of this black history of theirs.
We have to actually weigh in the community's opinion when we analyze values for heritage structure, maybe. Yep. Okay, maybe we could take the last question. Swapna again asks, would the country be able to do tech work and training along with it beyond international funding and support?
This is absolutely, I think. Why not? I think India has a lot of money. It just needs to be, if we just reduce those levels of bureaucracy, if there is a cut in every stage, automatically for the final product, there's not a money left. But I think that is why I personally feel that a lesser number of steps would be a little helpful. But I think, yeah, India, there's a lot of money for heritage, and I think particularly after COP26, particularly India has made a very steady comment on the fact that going zero carbon in by 2070, which includes aspirations like going electric from fuel vehicles, which is a huge part on the tech, I suppose, and people are going towards that direction. And particularly in the pandemic, I think we've understood what is the importance of technology, and there are people who are investing in it. But again, we just have to pitch it the right way to the right people. And so again, I think business is a very important way that we had to. So
we as emerging professionals are very hopeful and positive about this, right? So let me now just invite Shahzad to give a final vote of thanks, and then we can move on to the monthly meeting.
So again, this was third CultuRisk Tech Talk, and we are delighted to have Sukrit, who talked about his starting from his bachelor's life to projects to his higher learnings and to what he is doing right now. So it was a wonderful presentation and memories shared by Sukrit, and I hope everyone has enjoyed. And on behalf of ICOMOS, NSC RP, and Priyanka, I thank Sukrit and all the members who have taken their time to come and be with us. Thanks, Sukrit. Thanks a lot.